are in the last week of August, and although many of us are loath to think about it, autumn is coming and it will soon be time to close up the garden for the season and harvest what it has provided for us. Joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about the end of season and what should be done for your garden, I am joined by Susan from Jensen's Nursery and Garden Center. Hi, Susan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Have you back. Yeah. I'm going to start the conversation out by asking you how the summer's been. Last summer, we got no rain. This summer, we got a lot of rain, and COVID restrictions are eased up. So how was the summer at Jensen's?
It was good. It was just normal. It was just nice to have a normal time. A little bit too much water in some places. I know a lot of new plantings struggled because they were kept too wet. Okay. And that's one of the biggest problems we've had this summer. It's much better than having the really, really dry. I noticed the tree canopy around the city is doing beautiful. Yeah. They've enjoyed it. The well-established plants have really enjoyed the moisture. The newly established, not so much.
I've been on Facebook and friends of mine are already harvesting vegetables and things already from their gardens. What is ripening now, and how late in the season can you be pulling vegetables out of the ground?
Right now, I think it's mostly your tomatoes are starting to come into ripe, and people are continuously getting beans and peas, and the zucchini and cucumbers seem to be almost done. You might be getting a little bit more. The fall squashes are starting to come in. And as for harvesting late in the season, there is some, like your root crops, until the soil freezes, you can still be pulling up potatoes and carrots and radishes and onions. And yeah, as long as it doesn't start freezing on the soil. So those will go quite late. I know my sister always does a really late planting of lettuce seeds because that one can take quite a bit of cold as well. So you can continue on.
So we're starting to think about cleaning up the garden and the yard and whatever. And whenever I clean up my yard, one of the things I always think about is those big brown, waste, bags. But we really should be composting that material. Can you talk a little bit about composting? And is it difficult? And what kinds of things should we be doing to get the most out of our compost heap?
All your grass clippings, leaves, can go into the compost. The one thing that I would watch is if you've had something that's had a lot of insect damage or fungus on it throughout the season, those leaves you may not want to put into your compost. So the big brown bags are perfect for that because you don't want to have those spores or eggs or like that in there. So if you had something that's been really diseased and sad looking, take that when you cut it back, take that away and just put into the yard waste, recycle. And as for the composting, everything else that's like clean, tidy can be there. Another nice thing is your leaves, leaving the leaves in the flower beds.
Really?
When they fall, because that gives things like your beneficial bugs, like ladybugs and bees, it gives them some place to cover for the winter and have food. And it also will help protect your shrubs and perennials. So that's been a lot more of the trend lately is just leaving the leaves. You can mulch them, cut them up with your lawnmower and then place them in the garden because they can just be dug in and turned over next spring. What
about like mulching up? Now this is me being lazy. What about mulching up your leaves and just leaving it on the lawn?
You can. The lawn is, if it's fine enough, absolutely, because it'll put nitrogen back in. If it's really heavy, if you're one of those areas that have a ton of leaves, sometimes having too much leaf can add snow mold and things like that in the spring. So you want to make sure that it's not too much of a cover.
Is composting difficult? Like if I live in an apartment, can I still compost?
You can compost in a small way, absolutely. Keeping some containers. The biggest issue is you want to get air to it and you want to get it moving. Like a lot of times some of the composters have where you can turn it. That's really nice. And having air, so something that you can have some air into out on a balcony. Inside would be a little more tough because if you don't get that air into it, it may not compost correctly.
But like out on a balcony?
Yeah, out on a balcony, absolutely.
And then the last question I have about composting is, what is a compost accelerator?
It is actually microbial biology and microorganisms that will eat the debris and break it down into compost sooner.
So, like, can you give me an example?
Can't quite get down the scientific names, but it's microscopic microbes and bacteria, beneficial bacteria.
Okay.
So you think about everything has all the soil has beneficial bacteria in them, and it sort of provides these microbes into the soil. Whereas if sometimes the compost won't quite get them going, these are applying it, and then they start breaking down.
So the annuals are dead, and you've thrown them in the compost pile. What should we be doing with perennials to ensure their success? And can you talk a little bit about what perennial dividing is?
Perennial dividing, you can start typically after the long weekend. If the flowers are finished, I like doing my hostas. My daylilies are usually the first ones that I start dividing. Basically, it's you have a very large clump of a plant, you dig it up, and you cut it up into pieces. And you can use a shovel for this. We actually love dollar store steak knives. Work really, really well. Something serrated. And you just cut them into pieces, and then you can replant, some nice solid chunks. Most of them you'll see eyes or buds for next year. So you want to have 3 or 4 of the eyes in there for next year. Mm-hmm. And you can plant them back. And if you have too much, you can give to neighbors. People love that. And so we'll start doing the divisions after the long weekend. It gives the plant a little bit of time to still reestablish. And sometimes like daylilies or some of your plants are just not flowering as good, and they're kind of too tight, too big. They need that dividing every once in a while.
Mm. So if they don't need dividing, what kinds of things should we be doing with our perennials in general just to get ready for the winter?
In general, you can trim back. I like to leave my perennials up because it catches the snow. Mm-hmm. And some of them actually have really interesting fall colors and look. If you had something that was very diseased throughout the season, those ones I would cut back in the fall and dispose of the leaves just to not carry over any spores or insects. Right. But things like daylilies, hostas, I tend to leave them there. They collect, especially sedums, grasses, look really nice because then if we get the hoarfrost in the winter, having them up, it actually looks a really neat effect. But then in early spring, I would cut down. Some people do say, nope, we just want to clean up and tidy up for the winter. And you certainly can. So it's cutting the plants back to about 1 inch to the ground and cleaning up.
One of the other things I know that people do in the fall is they'll plant bulbs. Mm-hmm. What should they be looking for in a good quality bulb? And when should they ideally be starting to put them in the ground?
Typically, I would say the first 2 to 3 weeks of October, you want to put them in the ground. If we have really, really warm fall, I've sometimes seen those bulbs start actively trying to grow, which can be a little bit tough. So you want it, most of them will be in the stores in the next 2 weeks. You want to look for bulbs that are firm, a nice size, and overall quality is the firmness, that they're not gone mushy or anything like that. But planting in that mid-October around Thanksgiving or later. And they're a great way to have some spring flowers and early spring.
Yeah. Is there like a side of the house that is better to plant them on? Like how much sunshine do they need?
Depending on them, most of them do like 4 to 6 hours sun going on west or south side. They will come up quite early if you get them in by the foundation on those sunny sides, which is kind of neat because you can have some tulips going and still have snow in other places of the yard, which is kind of nice. It makes you feel like spring is coming.
Yeah. I was on your website, and I read this clay buster. What is it, and what are its advantages?
Clay buster is a gypsum, and what it does is it takes the clay particles that are in there and it breaks them down and almost composts them in an accelerated manner. So you can take that and work it into the top couple inches of your soil, especially like if you have very old soil or, again, more clay-like soil, and it really breaks it up. And it's nice to do it in the fall time because then in the spring when you go to plant, you've got some nice, beautiful, loose soil.
Yeah. Nice, nice, nice. I was over in my mom's yard recently, and her shrubs have been going gangbusters with the rain that we've had. When is the best time to prune the shrubs? And aside from aesthetics, what are the advantages to pruning your shrubs, and for that matter, trees?
Would be for shape and aesthetics is one of the biggest reasons. Some of the plants having a nice pruning and cleaning out small broken or branches that cross gives you, especially in your trees, gives you a stronger structure. And that will give you a better plant in the long run. And also some of the shrubs, when they get so woody and they have so many branching,
Right.
they can get more diseases because they get no airflow between them. So things like the 9 barks that like getting powdery mildew, thinning the branches out on them and letting them have a little bit more airspace in between the leaves is beneficial for keeping those fungus and molds down. Most of your plants you can trim in the fall time. Again, I like to leave my hydrangeas up because, again, the winter effect is really neat. You don't want to prune lilacs or mock orange because if you prune them now, you actually cut the flower buds off for next year.
Okay.
Those two particular plants you want to prune right after they flower. So that's why if everybody's, I never get lilacs on my lilac bush, but you prune it every fall, that's why.
Okay, so like prune it like in July after
Yeah.
the smell and the flowers have
Exactly.
gone by. Yeah. One of the things I've always wondered about, and this is something my wife and I talk about, is how long should your grass be ideally before the snowfall?
I do like to take my grass down lower. Like typically you would be 1.5 inches, 2 inches throughout the summer because a longer lawn will give you one that can sustain drought better and other cut the weeds out. In the wintertime, I would take it down to almost an inch,
Really?
1.5 inches. What it does is the longer grass or the shorter grass will kind of deter things like voles and mice and those small pests that come in and chew on the grass.
Right.
It kind of keeps them away. And also in the spring when it melt, it'll keep things like snow mold off of the grass.
Mm-hmm. Susan, this has just been great. If people want to pick up supplies for the fall year cleanup, they can go to Jensen's Nursery and Garden Center, which is located at 2550 McGilvery, right? And am I right? Is there a sale on shrubs and perennials right now happening at Jensen's?
We have a 15% off sale right now on all our shrubs and perennials. And after the long weekend, we will start our fall deals, which typically we choose a perennial and a shrub each week to be at 50% off. So each week it's a different perennial, shrub, or grouping. So there'll be a bigger fall sale after the long weekend, but we are, in general, having the perennials and shrubs on.
And anything you need for fall cleanup, you can get at Jensen's Nursery and Garden Center, right? Including compost heaps? Compost bins?
I do not have compost bins.
Okay.
Not everything.
And you also have an online store. Where can people go online to get their questions answered and possibly order from the online store?
At jensennursery.com.
Amazing. Susan, again, this has just been great. Thanks for taking the time to come to our Classic 107 studio. And I've said this now, it's so nice to have somebody in the booth. It's just been great chatting with you today. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.